Welcome to TradeTheNBI.com. This is John's report is for the 28th of August. I have returned from the sea, beating the heat of the center of Florence. It was nice and cool, and things are about to drop temperature-wise as we move into September. And for the market, not a whole lot happened while I was away. We had that slight little push-up, came up against the 50%, and just put us right back pretty much in the same spot. But from a DOC standpoint, it was like we were talking about. We had the red leading originally on it. And as soon as that magenta faded, right under the 33 right there, that started creating some weakness and uncertainty. And then as soon as the white MBI popped, you can see the effect of that. And with that white MBI leading, turned to 0% likely. And still, markets held up quite well given that we've had this 42.74. So it's still the pressure and the calling point at this particular stage. So still, that's what I'm looking for, even if there's a bunch of noise until we get to that space. That's currently what's on tap for it. We're a little off on that number right there for the NQ. Should be up a little bit. And for the NQ, likewise, same configuration with that MBI leading. It's pretty tough, but you've got midterm buyers on DOC giving a little bit of a counter read. So not a whole lot of short activity, but do you have enough bulls to really move anything? And that's been the question. Does anyone really want to jump into these waters at this particular stage, given that you've got Treasuries still paying a significant yield, given where we're at with current inflation, and that a lot safer to be in treasuries at this particular point, and a whole lot better than it was back in April when people were buying at those crazy valuations. It was bizarre. But the Fed clearly signaling, as we knew from what they said, and reiterating that they're not stopping anytime soon, that this normalization level gives them a lot more flexibility. And that was always the concern, maintaining rates at the lower rates. One, you had that excessive liquidity that was floating around. Two, really didn't give them a whole lot of policy room. Now they've got a lot of that policy room built back into it. So it gives them the flexibility. With oil still at the 80 range there, difficult to expect any kind of change relative to where things are at. The only question then becomes, do you see a significant softening in real estate to the point where it starts to create any kind of a devaluation effect? And if we start to see any of that, then you've got a situation where all that free capital that was put into play may start to get squeezed a little bit, which would normalize things further, which from a Fed standpoint would be ideal. So it's kind of an interesting prospect there. And of course, Euro, in the recognition that the Fed is not stopping and there's no way the ECB can keep up. We're at the low end of the range now, and things start to get a little more precarious. Like I've said, as we talk about getting to that 106, this was all that MBI white lead at the 50%. We expected it to break when there was the pop above, and sure enough, it did, and moved to the 0 point, just as the white MBI suggested. And we're still in continuation mode, which is that orange between DOC cyan and DOC red, and getting no real lift whatsoever. So, like I said, it was a crazy idea to be in euros when you could be in dollars at this particular stage. Now, of course, you have the whole BRIC situation and things like that that are developing, and whether or not they get their complete act together, that's a significant hit to dollar power, particularly with Saudi Arabia joining and Brazil and the others. It certainly creates a potential interesting dynamic going forward, and how that gets dealt with is going to definitely be impactful on where the dollar ends up standing versus a lot of other. You're really creating what we talked about, that bifurcation of economies, the West versus the rest of the world. It's kind of what it's turning out to be. From a gold standpoint, it's still fairly weak given what the potentials are, but off its lows, and it's ready to build some strength from that standpoint. And we would expect that to carry through, particularly as oil stays where it is longer. Bitcoin in zero activity and just staying around that zero, which was the expectation from the MBI white spike lead that took place back over here above 50%. We expected that to break and then fill the positive extremes, going all the way down to the 27, and now that becomes the resistance for it on the upside of it. And ETH already having filled at zero, even on a spike, I would expect that to probably continue to fill back a little bit more. And at this particular stage, though, with Magenta leading but fading, it could be problematic for it. But that the deep dive here in the red DOC always usually creates a little bit of a bounce back. Usually not sustainable, and you got to come back, revisit the bottom, and then make your move back up. From a 50K standpoint, you can see it. We started with the nice little peak, got everybody excited, involved, all on positive extremes, and then they just pulled the rug right out of there and created some nice, beautiful short runs within that. And then we had the spike of white, led to a move to zero, and then we've been building off of that zero move, and not a whole lot of short activity, so still positive right now, and the potential for breaking above that 50K, 50% Fibonacci line on the 50K is real, particularly with the rising gold. So that will be easy one to follow. Right now you're getting a rejection DOC, cyan over the green, so that may just keep things in place for a little bit, but sort of that treading water effect. Here we look at it from Friday action. It was fairly muted, came down soft, and then pretty much based to pop up at the end. And it's kind of where we're at this particular stage in the pre-market. Has just been a chaotic mess of back and forth, no real leadership or direction. And that's just because there's just no real force pushing anything in one direction right now. So everyone's just trying to find a lever as we head into the end of the month, and that final few days of trade going in through there will certainly have an impact as we get towards the middle end of the week and transition to a new one. As always, though, continue to look for me on the Skype chat. Trade well. We'll talk to you later.